So welcome to another Guzzling Gourmet baking session. We're going to make a fairly traditional tart today. Okay, it's a Manchester tart. So some of you may have come across a Manchester tart, particularly if you come from up north. I did work in Manchester for a while, so it's not like, you know, I do have connections. So we're going to make a Manchester tart, which many school children will remember as one of their school dinner desserts. Okay, and so we need to start by making some pastry, short crust pastry, and then we're going to have to chill it for a bit and blah blah blah. And so we're going to be doing this obviously in stages. So start with, we're going to make our pastry. So in here I've got, how much have I got? I've got plain flour. Okay, I'll double check how much I've got, I can't remember that. I've got 100 grams of icing sugar. We're going to need a pinch of salt, and we want 125 grams of butter, which is currently chilling in the fridge. Okay. Now, you may have noticed, by the way, the shirt, nothing to do with Manchester. Okay, meatloaf. In the back there, Jim Steinman's album, Bad for Good, because I'm going to dedicate this one to Jim Steinman, who sadly passed away this week. Guy who wrote best ever album, my first ever album I acquired, I didn't actually buy it, I'll tell you that story, that I got. Okay, so this is for Jim, nothing to do with Manchester, as far as I know anyway, and this is a Manchester tart. So in here I've already got the flour measured out, 250 grams, okay, and then I'm going to add into that the icing sugar. Pinch of salt, okay, salt done, and then we're just going to mix that together, and then I'm going to get the butter out of the fridge and we're going to crumb that into it. So there's my butter, okay, I'm going to put that into there, and then we're just going to, not very well chilled in it, it's quite soft that bit, we're going to just then blend this two together till it sort of resembles breadcrumb type mixture. Now you'll also want a tablespoon of cold water and 1 egg. Okay, so the Manchester tart, okay, like I said, this was something that was up to about the mid-80s, quite often appeared, particularly up north, on the school dinner menu. But actually it goes back to Victorian times. So actually what we're making isn't the original version. The original thing was actually called a Manchester pudding. Okay, and then at some point along the line it became a Manchester tart. First recipe that we've got of the Manchester tart is from good old Mrs. Beeton in 1861. Now what I hadn't realised till I was doing a little bit of research about this tart was that actually Mrs. Beeton, although she gets credit for all her cookery books and or a book or whatever, many of the recipes and that in it weren't necessarily her own, a bit like me really. I'll go and find some recipes and I'll try them out. I don't know whether she really claimed they was all hers or not, I don't know, never read it. But she did actually nick quite a lot of stuff from other people, but there doesn't appear to be any record of this particular recipe. Her main source of recipes was a book written in 1845 by a woman called Eliza Acton, although I don't think she gets credit for Mrs. Beeton's book, but most of the recipes come from that, but certainly this recipe wasn't in her book. So it could well be a Miss Beeton recipe, or it could be one that was handed down verbally that she wrote down. So that's where it originates from, and back then it lacked a certain ingredient that we get in it today. Okay, probably if you were served this up, it had desiccated coconut on it. Obviously back then in Victorian times it didn't have coconut because they didn't have coconut, or the cooks wouldn't have had access to coconut. Right, I'm just going to give this a little bit more of a crumbing. You can see it's almost there. So I've got that crumb together. Now I'm just going to tip in a tablespoon of water, and then I'm going to break 1 egg into it. Okay, he says try not to get it over his camera hand, and does. And now we're just going to mix this in. Now if you've got like a food processor or mixer attachment or whatever, you can do it in that. It just needs a little bit of gentle pulsing, don't need too much. Okay, so now I'm just going to blend that water and egg in, okay, until it's formed a nice dough. Okay, it's all a bit sticky in a minute. So that's my dough all formed. I've tipped it out of the pan, or the bowl, sorry. And what we're going to do now is we're going to wrap it, and it's now going to go in the fridge to chill for at least an hour. Okay, so see you in a minute or in a second because of the magic of time. So jumped ahead a bit here. It had that almost hour in the fridge. Brought it out, I've rolled it, lined the pan, pricked it all over the fork, and then it's been in the freezer for an hour, okay, to chill right down. So now we're ready to blind bake the base. So you need your oven on 180. I've got some baking beans and I've got some foil, okay. Now I've lined it with foil because it's a better heat conductor. You can just do it with baking powder, it's up to you. And then all we're going to do is we're just going to put on baking beans or beads or whatever you want to call them, peas, all over that. And now that's going to go in the oven, and we're going to blind bake that for 10 minutes when we want to see these edges of this crust just starting to get colour, okay. And then we'll bring it out and we'll remove this, and then we'll do a final little bit of blind baking. So, don't think you can see it, the tart is now out of the oven. Okay, I've just got it down behind cooling. Okay, I gave it a little bit longer than the last 5 minutes because it wasn't quite dried all out. So we need to let it cool, but we can start preparing the custard filling that goes into this. Now I think I said to you at the beginning, a Manchester tart. So they always talk when I was at there. All the Manchester lads that I used to employ. Manchester. Anyway, it has a layer of raspberry jam, okay, spread on the base, and then that's covered with like a custard top, and then finally with a sprinkling of desiccated coconut on it. Got to let the wife in. So, as I was saying, and then desiccated coconut on top. Now, if you want to go real sort of retro style, add a glacé cherry in the middle. I haven't got any glacé cherries, and I wasn't going to buy a whole pot just for one. Okay, but anyway, we'll worry about that when we come to it. So what you're going to need is 100 grams of demerara sugar. Didn't want to come out then, did it? You want the zest of 1 lemon, so I've already done that. Okay, just put that in there. And then you're going to want 200 mils of full fat double cream. Okay, the fatter the better. Okay, we're old school here. None of this healthy stuff. And then we're going to want 200 mils of full fat milk, whole milk. Okay, so in that goes. Now, before we start heating that up and dissolving the sugar, okay, the other thing you're going to need are 5 egg yolks and 1 egg. Okay, so just breaking that into there. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to lightly beat these eggs together, and then they will be ready to go into the custard once we've got that heated through. So I'm going to start heating that through in a second. Okay, just to finish off a little bit about Jim Steinman there, his album Bad for Good. Now, Bad for Good was an album he released under his own name. Okay, very much in the vein of Meatloaf's Better How. Well, Jim Steinman wrote it, didn't he? But the story I always heard was that he had all these songs, and they obviously couldn't fit on Better How, and they didn't really they weren't able at that time to do Better How 2, So Meatloaf said to him, well, why don't you do it? So Jim Steinman released it under his own name, did his own singing, and then I was wrong for disappointed. But then essentially that same album got released as another Bat Out of Hell album by Meatloaf, and it sort of seemed to be forgotten that actually most of them tracks had already been released by Jim anyway. But anyway, well worth a listen to if you like Bat Out of Hell, and if you don't like Bat Out of Hell, what are you doing here? Go away. Right? But that's all. I'll let you off. Anyway, so these are lightly beaten together. We're now just going to put a bit of heat onto this, and I'm just going to stir this, gently warming it until all of that sugar has dissolved. So while this is sort of coming up to the boil and the sugar's melting, it does feel like most of the sugar's gone. It's not so gritty now. Just a little bit more about the Manchester Tart. So Manchester Tart is still made in Manchester, but you can find it actually quite, a lot of different places now. But there's apparently a baker's, Roberts of Balesworth, up in Manchester, who claim to be the home of the Manchester Tart. I don't know whether they mean they're claiming that it was their bakery that started it, or whether that's just the place now to get your Manchester Tarts. I don't know. And then a little bit of trivia regarding an article in 1946 asking children in the East End of London, obviously World War II and everything, and they said to them, what's your favourite foods? A Manchester Tart, and this is in the East End of London, Manchester Tart was in the top 5 choices. Okay, apparently they prefer pancakes and these exotic canned fruits that they could then get, like pineapple and loganberries. I presume they come over with the Yanks. And then just to give you an idea, their worst choice, the kids' worst choice, rice pudding. Okay, rice pudding, which of course at the time would have been made with dried milk. I dare say they added a bit of water, weren't just rice and dried milk. And apparently 2 kids voted for that one, said they liked that one. 2,312 said no. So there you go. So I'm just waiting for this to come up to the boil, and then I'm going to more or less turn it off down to the heat. Now, turn it off down to the heat. Turn the heat down so it's more or less off. Also, you want to just take your oven down to about 160. That's a fan. If it's like before I said 180. If it's not a fan, put an extra 20 degrees on. So let that cool down to 160. You're going to want your egg, like I say, lightly beaten. And what we will do is, when this is all ready, we will pour a little bit of that into the egg mixture, because obviously we don't want to cook the eggs sort of all in one go. So we sort of like preparing it, right? So this isn't quite at the boil yet, so you might as well go now. I've told you my story about Manchester Tart. So that's just come up to the boil. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to add a little bit of that to that, and then we're just going to whisk that in. And then I'm just going to gradually add more and more of the milk, gradually whisking it in until we've mixed the two together. So I put all that in the bowl, give it a good whisk. Now it's gone back into the pan, and it got on a nice low heat, and we now need to keep stirring it, keep it continually stirred until it sort of starts to thicken. I mean, at the minute it's very liquidy. Obviously we want it to become like a custard. We don't want it set, right? So we can do that until it gets to that stage where it's starting to thicken. Then we're going to turn the heat off, okay, and then we'll start preparing the jam in the case while this just cools a little bit. So I told you that was all the stuff I knew about Manchester Tart. Jim Steinman, him and Meatloaf apparently used to constantly fall out and then make up, fall out, make up. People used to say weird stories about Jim. I don't know if it's true or not. Apparently he used to sleep in a coffin at one point, they said, but I think that was like a publicity thing that was done during the sort of Meatloaf Bat Out of Hell thing, and it was like all a bit of a bit like a publicity stunt, I think, but of course everybody's believed that. Obviously that's how Jim Steinman used to sleep every night in a coffin. But there you go. So I haven't played you any Meatloaf in the background or any Jim Steinman, because YouTuber tell me, you know, oh, copy on YouTube. Talking of YouTube, you could always like this video, you don't have to just pretend you haven't watched it and ignore it. You can always subscribe if you like. Get a weekly update, well, weekly video, at least one a week. Anyway, I'm waiting for that to start thickening. So when that's done, I'll take it off heat and then I'll catch up with you. Making a Manchester tart, marrying a Manchester tart. So that's now just starting to thicken, so I'll turn the heat off. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're just going to set this to one side to let this cool a little bit. Okay, because we'll finish off the cooking of it in the oven. So just put that over there. Now we take our tart base, and this is where we're going to take about 2 tablespoons of raspberry jam. Okay, this is seedless. How can you have seedless jam? That's the bloody wife for you, that is. So we just spread the jam all over the base. So that's all over the base of that. Now we go back to our custard, and we're now just going to pour that over the top. Now, whoops, a bit lumpy there. Whoa, it's a bit lumpy in the corners, I won't put that bit in. Okay. So, spilt down the side. So just give it a little nudge just to make sure it's all done. Now, that's going to go air bubble there. Get rid of that. That's now going to go in the oven, like I say, 160 for about 20 to 25 minutes. And we want it so that when we bring it out, it's sort of slightly wobbly. Now, while that's cooking, get yourself some desiccated coconut, because when it first comes out of the oven, we're then just going to sprinkle that desiccated coconut over the top. So let's let it finish baking. So that's out of the oven now. Okay, it's still a little bit wobbly. All I'm going to do is, at the moment, I'm just going to transfer that over onto wire rack to have a bit cool. Get that out of the way. And this is where we take our desiccated coconut and we just sprinkle it over the surface. And like I say, if you want to be sort of truly sort of nostalgic, it used to always be served with a glacé cherry poked in the middle, but we haven't got one of them and we're not adding it, so just a little bit more, I think. Get around them edges, and there is your traditional Manchester tart as per Victorian recipe. Now you do sometimes find they say these come with bananas. I think that was because the chef Marcus Waring did one where he put slices of banana on top of the jam and then put custard on top, but that wasn't traditional. Okay, that's just a variation, and you might find that other people put other things in there, but that there, short crust pastry, raspberry jam, and then an egg custard on top sprinkled with desiccated coconut is your Manchester tart. And when that's cool, we're going to enjoy some of that. I might even let you look. So still a little bit warm yet, but I thought I'd let you have a little bit of a tasting. Okay, or rather let you watch me taste it. So it's not quite fully cooled down and set yet. I don't know whether you can see. There is a thin layer of jam at the bottom there. I was going to say, it's quite an eggy custard, as you'd expect, but then straight away you get that hit of the jam. Hint of the coconut. Well, there you go, there's jam on the bottom. I'm trying to think what it reminds me of, because I've never had Manchester tart before. Certainly wasn't anything I remember having at school. Crust me out. But it does remind me of something that used to have jam in, but I can't remember what it is. But there you go. The original jam tart called the Mrs. Beaton. I think I'm going to enjoy that.